This is a little different. From what I've seen, people that do vlogs are for modern shows. This time, I'm doing a series of old movies, which may or may not be in the public domain. I should probably give a little background first. I was introduced to the character of Sherlock Holmes in a rather strange way. A show called Sherlock Holmes in the 22nd Century. The basic premise is that after the famed detective was killed, he was cryogenically frozen and then brought back to life years later. It's an odd premise, but the basic idea of the characters are still intact. Even if Lestrade is a woman, and Watson is a robot instead of a surgeon. Years later, I came across 2 tapes with Sherlock Holmes from the 40s. This was a little bit of a gamble. Either these were going to be forgotten classics, like It's a Wonderful Life, or something boring like Casablanca. The star was Basil Rathbone. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And the adventures were called Terror by Night and The Woman in Green. I started with Terror by Night and found it to be really good. The next day, I saw The Woman in Green, and I found it just as good. Shortly after, I found a small collection starring Ronald Howard, no relation to Opie. This is not the collection I'm talking about. The original one I got rid of years ago, considering this has all the episodes of the Ronald Howard series. Now, the main thing is that the Ronald Howard series was meant for television, so each mystery was only about a half hour. So I was very disappointed considering Terror by Night and The Woman in Green were well over an hour mystery, so you could have a lot more interesting plot twists, different suspects, and the like. Multiple years later, I then found this collection, which, as I stated before, has all the episodes of the Ronald Howard series. Going into the premise again that it was meant to be a show, I found it to be a lot more interesting. It's also in this collection that I found out that the character of Sherlock Holmes has been around for a lot longer. In addition to all the episodes of the series, there were also a few major-length films. I started with Murder at the Baskervilles, starring Arthur Wanter. I really hope I'm pronouncing these names right. Where, if you look really closely, this was filmed in 1937. Now, I know with these being filmed in the 40s that these were pretty old, but I had no idea that there was one before them. Now, after that little collection I mentioned with the Ronald Howard episodes, I also found this shortly after. I saw it said Basil Rathbone again, and I figured this was good. And yes, I would definitely put it up there with The Woman in Green and Terror by Night. More recently, I found another collection of sorts, starring a whole bunch of different Sherlock Holmes, as mentioned before, Basil Rathbone, Nigel Bruce. I'm not sure why his name is up there. That's who they got to play Watson in the Basil Rathbone movies. And Christopher Lee, which I had no idea he played Sherlock Holmes until both this collection and this collection. So the main reason I'm making these vlogs is based off of this collection, which for the first time, I can finally see all of the movies starring Basil, and in pristine high definition. According to the back of the box, it says that these underwent some really extensive restoration, and I can definitely agree with that. Judging solely by these 3 movies, I can tell you that the picture is okay, but there is some sort of weird wind sound effect in the background of all 3 of these.
Must we have that window open, Gregson?
Oh, shut it if you want to.
Rather a nuisance. Traveling by train.
And now we come to the next object on our list, or I should say objects, because there are 3 of them.
Which has been removed in this one. I will admit, that's a lot of exposition before my review, but this is necessary to show where I'm coming from in terms of the character, how it was introduced, etc., etc., etc. So I started with the movie called The Scarlet Claw. The opening starts out pretty dark, actually. Inside of a popular pub, everybody stands perfectly still, with only the sound of a bell tolling in the distance. Some talking begins among the patrons, but only in low tones. We gather that this town, Le Rouge, is being haunted by a malevolent spirit. Its victims have been spotted in a swamp outside of town with their throats ripped out. One of the townsfolk, being a man of God, does not fear this spirit and investigates the bell. What he discovers is Lady Primrose with her throat ripped out. It would appear she was tolling the bell as a way of asking for help before she was maliciously murdered. We then go into a meeting of the Royal Canadian Occult Society, where Sherlock Holmes is doing some questioning. He's not really buying into this whole ghosts and goblins and ghoul things, but rather believes that there must be some sort of explanation behind it. While this meeting is off limits to non-members, a small messenger boy comes forward. It is here William Primrose, the man who called the meeting, learns of his wife's gruesome murder. The meeting is quickly adjourned, and Sherlock Holmes heads off to Lamore Rouge to investigate. Along the way, we are given multiple suspects: the husband, the hotel keeper, a retired judge, and an old hermit. There is also a moment where Sherlock comes face to face with the spirit. I just love the idea Sherlock is so grounded in reality that he takes out his gun and starts shooting at it. Another touch I also love is how they first reveal the real culprit. His face is just in the shadows, leaving the audience more time to see who it really is. More than that, I feel would ruin the mystery. All in all, I'd say it's a solid adventure. Even though it's an hour and 40 minutes, it has a way of keeping your attention all the way through to the end. There is also an emphasis on atmosphere here. Even though it's a mystery, it's shot very much like a horror movie, and even at times a slasher. However, the movie knows to keep its focus on the mystery rather than the gruesome murder scenes. If you're a fan of mystery, or even old cinema, I highly recommend this. For general audiences, I say you'll realize if it's your thing within the first 10 minutes or so. I have a lot more of these to get through, so I'll decide a favorite afterwards. However, out of all the ones I've seen so far, this one has got to be the best. Join me next time for The Hound of the Baskervilles, which is the only one I've actually read from beginning to end, or at least the non-abridged version. A while ago I did read The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, but this was many, many years ago. And as you can tell, it's an illustrated version, so the main idea of the story is there, but not written exactly like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle intended.